Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like most people are into the session. Thank you again for meeting with us today and taking the time to join us. My name's Nate Robinson. I'm a landscape architect with Chalet. I'm also the creative director for our landscape division. Joining me today is Adam Sturtewagen. He's one of our client relationship managers, and he handles a lot of our maintenance accounts. And what we're going to review today are two projects that we were fortunate enough to win gold awards from the Illinois Landscape Contractors Association. Each year, the ILCA offers award categories in two different categories, one for landscape maintenance, the other for landscape construction. And we were fortunate enough last year to win a gold award for landscape construction for one of our projects in Highland Park, and a gold award for landscape maintenance at one of our projects in Winnetka. So we'll go through, Adam will go first, review some of the maintenance aspects of that project, and then I will go through the landscape construction project. Along the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to fill out a question in the chat or the Q&A button. And at the end, we will do a 10-15 minute Q&A session back and forth. So with that, I'll hand it over to Adam. Let me screen share here real quick and get my presentation up.
All right. Here we go. You got it.
Yep.
Thanks, Nate. So yeah, as Nate mentioned, my name's Adam. On the CRM side, the client relation management side of things here at Chalet. So since I've been here at Chalet, I've been in both the design world as well as the maintenance management, or as we like to call it, the maintenance, landscape management or landscape maintenance program. So this is in Winnetka. This is a project here, the first project that we were lucky enough to win this prestigious award here for the maintenance side of things is in Winnetka. So a lot of our projects that we maintain, we like to start from the design programming and then follow that process through from design build all the way to the actual management and maintenance of the property. So at Chalet, that is our goal. We know that's not always the case, but a lot of our sites are kind of the starting point is from the design to the building, the planting, and then ultimate goal of maintaining those properties. So we do projects of all different scales, from tiny little sites and properties to larger estates and everything in between. So this particular site, as we mentioned, is in Winnetka. The site, the house was purchased, I believe, in 2016 from one of our longtime loyal customers that's been with us for many years, and we maintained their previous property on the other side of Winnetka, a little closer to the lake. So it's been a really fun and enjoyable, I think I've known this client here for about probably 14 years. So knew them at the old house and transitioned the maintenance and the design to their new home. The first couple slides here, you're gonna see what the condition was of the site when the homeowner purchased the property in about 2016, I think it was. The house itself was built in the 1930s. You can go ahead, Nate, and skip ahead. A lot of these slides here at the beginning are just simply showing what the condition was. There was a lot of buckthorn, a lot of mulberry, a lot of invasive trees that pretty much engulfed the entire property. So it's kind of a square property. It's, I think, just shy of 2 acres, about 1.75 acres. And it was literally just completely covered in overgrown, undesirable plant growth. So step one was to come in and start a design program. So I was able to design this program here. I started just a general kind of program for what the client's ultimate goals were for the end goals, what their needs were, what their wants were. And then that transitioned into, maintaining the plants that we installed. So step one was to come in and essentially remove and update a lot of these beds, everything from the foundation of the house to the adjacent 4 corners of the property. You can go ahead. So the next slides here would show some of the plants that also engulfed and just took over the foundation. The house has had some renovations within the house itself, from a single story to more of a two-story house, kind of a Cape Cod-ish architecture, which complements the site very well. So again, knowing this client, and it's been such a nice, fun relationship, kind of getting to know some of the styles that they like and what their end goals would be for this new property. So that was started in about 2016. Lots of demolition, lots of removals, and then coming in with the design and the implementation. So you can go ahead to the next slide. There was some fencing along with the plant material that came out, but we did try, one thing that we tried to do was to keep some of the existing features on site, to keep some of the integrity, such as the native stone. There was some native limestone, flagstone, as well as some granite boulders. So trying to keep that and use some of it and repurpose some of it with an end goal of how are we going to reuse this into a new design and then maintain it, you know, for long-term longevity. So we'll come in and do things like pressure washing and cleaning up some of the low walls. But essentially, we kind of started from pretty much scratch on the majority of the property. So keeping some of the structural issues. This was the design that was rendered, and there's been several modifications and revisions since then, but it gives you kind of a layout of the property. So go ahead, Nate. The front foundation, as I mentioned, there was some stone that was kept, but one major change was changing out the driveway. This area of Winnetka is certainly within a floodplain zone, which there are a few of those in Winnetka. So water has been one of the issues that I think we've really improved on the site. So pulling out some of the existing asphalt, the impermeable surfaces, and coming in with more of a permeable base that helps water penetrate into the ground. So that has been a really nice improvement. So we've done things such as maintaining, you know, the hardscapes on a weekly basis after the installation was done. So those are really good things. That one thing I like about Chalet's program is that with the weekly maintenance, if we start from the beginning, we know those types of things, like, you know, the construction and the materials and the bases for a new project on a site like this, versus other sites where, you know, we may inherit, where we don't necessarily know what the subsurfaces are going to be like, or what we're going to have to, challenges we're going to be up against from a maintenance side of things. So this is a couple years in after our front foundation planting. There's been a lot of growth here, especially along the front foundation. But you can go ahead there, Nate. Trying to keep within the integrity of the neighborhood, some of the native kind of woodland plants that were existing, but mostly a lot of this was new. So native trees, river birch, some viburnums. We incorporated a few things in the design. I had some black tupelo. I think we also had, it's been a few years back now, but some of the, you know, willows. So there were a few oaks and hickories, as well as a couple really nice American elms. So things such as the tree care. As a certified arborist, I'm trying to always look at the trees. So much of what we do is around foundations and, you know, lower, but looking up and seeing, you know, what the mature trees are and trying to keep the overall health of this. So Bartlett tree experts have helped us on this site. It's an integral part of overall maintenance on any property, is looking at existing mature trees, whether it's compaction during construction, or, you know, simple things like tree protection with fencing. So we tried to do our best to protect the existing trees on the site during the construction. Go ahead, Nate. With the water issues, with maintenance, chalet maintenance, you know, we deal with lawns, and there are a lot of wet sites. So one continuing topic that we're always talking about is how to deal with wet sites, especially with lawns. So things like bent grass or creeping ranunculus that come into these properties and can be a real challenge are things that we try to address, and we do address on a continuous basis. So within our maintenance program, some things that we try to find that might set us apart from other service providers is that we do try to focus on our integrated pest management, our IPM program. So looking at what we're applying to the lawns and the beds, and those regimens, or what are we applying and how often are we applying them versus, broadcast spraying. Selectively looking at herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, and only using them on a as needed basis. Go ahead, Nate. A few of the other items that has been fun to kind of work with here with the client over the years would be, the seasonal changeouts. So on a lot of our designs that get implemented, we'll try to bring in some extra color, and that can be done with the seasonal changeouts. So container plantings, border beds, bed borders, whether it's an entry or a drive, the annual color can always add a lot of nice splash of color. So the fun part about that is you can always change it. So from one year to the next, we can tweak it, we can change it. So kind of that balance on the design side of perennial herbaceous versus annual versus woody shrubs and trees, it's constantly evolving. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Items such as, general maintenance from week to week. So things that we're constantly looking at would be everything from water features to irrigation systems. So one thing that I do enjoy kind of within the design department and then now into maintenance and still within design is that I have a chance to work on site, and it's all hands on deck. So we're always looking at irrigation zones. Some properties will be hands on, where we manage the irrigation systems, and other times the homeowner or the client will do it themselves. A lot of times it's kind of a combination or a tag team approach of water regimen. So every square inch of your property, how much water is it getting? Is it enough? Is it not enough? And then do we need an in-ground irrigation system? Maybe we don't, maybe we do. So looking at those types of things on a property such as this, running water up to a water feature or a site feature like this, so that you have a continuous flow of water. Is there evaporation? The client has several dogs, so the dogs actually jump up and, believe it or not, have sat in this bowl, which I think is fun and awesome. They literally sit inside of that bowl. This is an aquascapes feature, which has been, fun to work with, but there's maintenance. So maintenance tasks, how do we winterize it? How do we, running it, and system maintenance on the units themselves. Go ahead, Nate. I think it was 2 summers ago, we actually helped, there was a family wedding. I think it was 2 summers back. So coming up with like a color palette and a scheme for the wedding. So helping with things, whether it's seasonal changeouts or planning in advance or something like that. We talk about during the, not only the initial design program, but as things come up. So within the weekly maintenance program, we're there to kind of address these things, and it's a fun evolving process. I mentioned some of the seasonal containers. Same thing with the ground plantings. We can tweak these, we can change things from season to season based on what the interests are. You can go to the next slide there. The dogs absolutely love to run and play in the yard. The homeowners have several kids, 3 boys and a girl that are older, a little bit older in age. Now there's grandkids at the house. So it's been really fun to just see how the family uses the landscape, how they use their outdoor spaces, and how it, mixes from the inside. So for example, the portico on the house, the porch that's underneath the middle area, and that transition from inside to outside has been pretty seamless. As I mentioned, we're still kind of working through, some of the wet areas and some of the issues that we have with the lawn, but it's gotten better. So we're trying to approach strategically, how you want to deal with things on an ongoing basis with lawn and bed, whether it's fungal issues or invasive weeds. Go ahead, Nate. One thing I loved hearing from the client and the owners from the start was the appreciation for fall color. It's one of my favorite seasons, so it's been incredibly fun to hear, what colors and what textures we'd want to see throughout the landscape. So range from, the maples that were adjacent to the property, borrowed views of fall color, as well as integrating things like bald cypress, birch, additional maples, can bring in that color and that texture throughout the season. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. That was great to see all the maintenance practices on that property, and a recap of, kind of how we took that project from the very beginning design all the way through to maintaining it currently over the last, 4 or 5 years. So the second project that I'm going to review now with you is one that we won a gold award for landscape construction in Highland Park. And again, it's kind of the same format. We'll go through some before photos showing you the site, and then, how we dealt with some of the challenges and came up with solutions to address those. So it was a new construction home. This is 2018, early summer. There was a home there previously that was a single-story ranch that the client purchased, demoed, and kept one little corner of the back foundation. As you'll see, there's a ravine leading out to Lake Michigan in the backyard. So that one little corner was basically encroaching, and they were allowed to keep the footprint and build up if they did not demo that one little corner. So they're able to keep the same footprint of the back of the house, and then build up from there. So a very, modern looking home, a lot of clean lines, straight lines. We'll go through this is the front entry here. And you can see there's, floor to ceiling windows in the front, as well as leading out to the back. So this main kind of corridor through the front was a really important part of the project, and a really area of focus that the client wanted to make it a really kind of a wow experience as you come through the front, as guests come over as they come to the front door. So that was one challenge and one thing that we wanted to focus on. Before they purchased the home, I think the old home had been abandoned or vacant for a couple years, so no one was really maintaining the property. So there's a lot of buckthorn and weed trees that were bordering the property, as well as the lawn was in terrible shape. And it's a construction site as well, so you have a lot of soil compaction, a lot of foot traffic, machinery coming back and forth through there. So that's pretty common. A lot of new construction scenarios that we encounter, that there's a lot of soil disturbance and compaction that we need to consider in our new design approach. This is the back of the home, and as I mentioned, it's very close to this ravine edge here. Ravine edges in general are very sensitive environments. There's a lot of potential for erosion and for this edge to kind of creep back as the years go by. So being mindful of how our design would impact that, making sure that we are not building too close to that edge. Also in Highland Park, there's a 15-foot steep zone setback. So 15 feet, for example, from here is pretty close to the house. So there's a kind of imaginary line running through here that we needed to be mindful of, that we can only do so much work in that zone. Some materials in the house that we wanted to work with, in terms of playing off of that, the natural stone that's being mortared here, Ipe siding in that kind of horizontal fashion was an inspiration for part of the design as well. Again, this is just showing kind of how narrow some of these spaces are in the back between the footprint of the house and the ravine itself. Like I said, the ravine is a challenge, but it's also a huge benefit, in terms of the property itself. It's very private in the back. The clients have an awesome view out of the back of the house to this, beautiful wooded ravine. And, in the fall as well, it's loaded with yellows and golds and reds and a lot of great color. Deer kind of hopping up out of the ravine. So it's a pretty idyllic setting. Part of our design process, no matter what the project is doing site analysis and doing, kind of boots on the ground measuring and understanding what the current conditions are. So whether that's soil conditions, sun shade conditions, location and health of existing plant material, that paired with information that we get from your Plata survey regarding setbacks and property lines and utility locations, all of those things go into how we approach the design and ultimately, how things are placed or where things are located. It's all very important to the overall design and the functionality of it once it's installed. So this was our design solution. And again, the architecture in the home is very modern, very sleek, very simple. So we wanted the landscape design to reflect that as well. You'll see as we go through some of the photos that we use a very scaled back planting palette. We really only used river birch, oak sedge for the ground cover, some spring bulbs, and then juniper and arborvitae for some evergreen balance and some screening. But I mentioned previously this front entryway was really important. So we ended up designing this water feature that welcomes you to the front door with these floating pedestal steppers leading over the water. The back patio, again, being mindful of how close we are to that bluff, ends up being a pretty large patio. It can accommodate a lot of people, but is also viewed out these large doors to the back. These areas here and here are actually epay decking at grade. And the reason for that is that, this property and all properties have a max amount of lot coverage that you can do, a max amount of hard surface that you can have on the property, being mindful of how much water your property can actually absorb before it runs off to the neighbors, or in this case, runs into the ravine. So having these be open slatted epay decking at grade allows the water to run through and helps us be a little bit more mindful of how much runoff we're encountering. The other main feature that we'll go through is off of the back bedroom here. Again, floor to ceiling windows. The client wanted to see some type of focal point and kind of wow feature out the back. So we have this secondary patio with some single stem birches and then annual containers in there as well. And part of our design process for larger projects like this too is we'll do a 3D phase kind of showing what the views may look like. So this is a view if you were standing out in the front cul-de-sac. Wanted to create some berming here, so you've got a little bit of grade change and help buffer some of the garage as well as the front of the house. This is right at the end of a cul-de-sac, so when you drive up, it's just the entire property is laid out in front of you. So we wanted to create a little bit of landform to help buffer that a little bit. The entry gates we ended up not doing, that could potentially be done at a later phase, but was part of the initial concept. And then again here, kind of a view of how that water feature would work as people are coming to the front door. So this is during the start of construction, and this is pretty typical in terms of where we start with. After we have all of our demo done, we start with the messier parts of the project, a lot of the hardscapes typically, getting all of that laid out first. So here we've got the compacted gravel base in place, and we've got sprayed out where the stone border would be located, where the containers are going to be put in the middle, and then where the planting trees would be located as well. And this is about midway through that. So we've got blue stone border with our mortar haunch there to hold that in place. Excuse me. And then single stem birches through here, which eventually we did have lighting on each one of those too. So even at night, you've got a nice uplit feature there. And this is kind of the finished product there with blue stone chip, just to give a little bit of a texture difference between the hard edge and then that more gravel border. It's a really nice way to play off of that texture. For the water feature, it was something that was a very key part of the design. So we actually started with some mock-ups. This is I see Adam smiling. This is our warehouse up at our landscape division. So we just literally took sidewalk chalk and started drawing it out to scale to make sure what we had on paper was actually comfortable size-wise in reality. You know, we wanted to make sure that, you know, these gaps in between the steppers were comfortable, felt like it was a nice pace as you're walking up to the front door. So yeah, laid it out in reality to see how it actually felt before we built it. Sorry. So then this is actually during construction of the water feature. So it was a 3 foot deep pool, ended up being with koi. So it's 3 foot deep, it's heated, and koi are kept in it year round. So you can see kind of the intricacies of the plumbing and how that all goes in. In-ground water features, you know, whether it's a pool or a fountain, or in this case, you know, kind of a larger koi pond, they're all, you know, pretty intense when it comes to labor and time and, you know, design and how they're going to lay out all the different elements you need, power supply, gas supply for heating, all of that. You know, it's basically doing an in-ground pool just at different sizes. So it can be some pretty significant projects. But here the crew is starting to frame out where those pedestals are going to be. We actually poured full concrete pedestals so that those bluestone slabs could sit right on top. And you can see here, this is the plastic tubing going in. This is actually, each pedestal is heated so that even in the wintertime, you know, doesn't have to be any shoveling done of snow on top of that. So year round, and these pedestals are heated and warm and clean, and the water for the fish is also heated. And then the next step after that was actually bringing in all the shotcrete, pouring it in there, getting it all framed out, getting it leveled. And of course, it's, you know, one of the coldest days of the year, and the guys are out there doing that, so everyone's bundled up, trying to work through that. And this is the finished product. So, you know, those pedestals float just above the water line. They're big, they're 3 foot by 6 foot. So they're nice big slabs, you know, so that if you're standing on it, you don't feel like you're wobbling or you feel like it's too small. It's a nice large landing. And then, you know, the koi in here, and then some bubblers for aeration. That's a little bit more of a panned out view. So here, actually, I'm standing about where all the pump system is located underground in a vault that operates the entire system. So that's hidden in the landscape bed. And then I mentioned earlier, the plant palette was very simple. So we've got, you know, river birch placed in through here strategically to help frame your view of the front door and screen some of the views of the garage. But then the ground cover here is all oak sedge, so, which is native. It grows as more of like a woodland ground cover. Has that great light green color to it early in the summer, and then more of a copper color in the fall. We end up doing that everywhere with some juniper. It's hard to see in this photo, but placed in the background here to give some foundation, evergreen. Again, this is early spring, so this really light green, fluffy texture to it. Client had these statues. They're collectors, so they wanted to have those placed out front, kind of flanking the front door. And then in the springtime, we have, I think it was over 7,000 bulbs planted here, daffodils and camassia. Daffodils in particular because they will naturalize and keep coming back year after year versus tulips that we'd have to come in and place and plant typically every fall. So we wanted to give some type of spring color. You know, we don't have any spring blooming trees or spring flowering plants, so I want to make sure that the springtime was covered with this bulb meadow that's evolving and changing. And the benefit of that too, as you can see, you know, this is the sedge in early spring. This is probably, I'd say late April, mid-late April. So the sedges are still dormant for the most part. So instead of having just the nubs of the sedges there, you've got the bulbs coming up, putting on their show. And as they die back to the ground, the sedges are filling in. So you've got that succession of plant material. Annual containers too. We did the annual containers for some of the areas. The client did some on her own too. It was kind of a partnership when it came to that. But this is the roof deck area off of the upstairs second level. And this is a overall kind of finished aerial shot, similar to that landscape plan that we started with. And you can see how that lays out with the water feature here in front, the meadow effect here with the berms in the front yard. We did do an arborvitae hedge along the side here for some privacy. Borrowed from the neighbor's hedge here. We didn't have to do really much planting on this side. It was already pretty well screened. And then again, back here, you can see just how close that bluff edge is. So how our features kind of fit into that space. All right, so that was the landscape construction award and the landscape maintenance one. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to fill out the Q&A. We've had a couple start up here throughout, so let me go through those. First question actually is good. Is this being recorded and can you listen later? Yes, it is being recorded and it'll be available to you later. After the session, if there's any questions that people may not have asked or something comes to mind later, you can email at hello@chaleznursery.com. That goes to our staff and then gets distributed to the appropriate people depending on which question might be.
Nate, I understand the video will be available on YouTube, on our Chalet YouTube page.
Okay, great.
I had a question pop up here. It was sent to me about our mosquito abatement program. So within our landscape management and maintenance program, we're excited because we've had it in place, the program in place for a few years now, and it's kind of taken off. So it's close to heart for me because I know one thing, at least in my world, I'm trying to think about pollinators. I do enjoy some beekeeping, so it's topical. So we get a lot of questions about, do we have a program for mosquito abatement? And if we do, how often are we making applications? What are we making for the applications? So within our IPM program, with our kind of layered team approach, your CRM or your site manager, your designer would typically talk to you about that program, but we do have that, and it's been very popular in the last several years. So it's an all hands on deck approach where Edgar Lopez and I might meet on a site, walk it, find out, where the problem areas might be for mosquito habitat. And then if we have, our default is to not necessarily, like I mentioned earlier, broadcast spray. So thinking of the pollinators, if your neighbor has, honeybee colonies in their backyard, we're taking these things into consideration at all times and giving you a number of different options. There's 2 options that we typically can provide for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Another one here is what is the name of the decking material? It was Ipe, it's IPE. It's a Brazilian hardwood, very, very durable. It's incredibly dense, and there's only certain types of screws that you can actually use to penetrate the wood. So it's used for exterior functions like that, whether it's siding or decking. It's definitely on the upper end of the price point just because of the availability of it as well as the durability of it, but it's a really beautiful material. Typically, if you don't do any type of staining on it, it'll weather to like a gray, almost like a weathered cedar. If you see a cedar fence, it's more of a gray color, but you can stain it and maintain it as well. It's a good question on that. Another one we had was a question about how long did the construction project take? Just roughly, like how long was that whole process? From the time that we started the design process until the end of construction, I would say it was about a 6-month process. We started in the springtime, with the initial consultation and the discussion of the project, and then started with the design, research with the village, the zoning, the setbacks, the bluff setbacks and issues I mentioned before, working through that, and then through the permit process, and then throughout construction, we finished up right around Halloween or the first part of November that year. So that was also, partially because the home was still being under construction at the time too. So we were kind of working back and forth and around, with the contractor. So, but yeah, it was about 6-month process overall. I also see Judith asked about if we know the name of the architect who designed that house. I do, but I'm completely blanking on it at the moment. If you could please email that question at the hello@shaleynursery.com, I will be more than happy to get back to you with that answer. But I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what that architect was at the moment. We've got a few chat questions here. Question about, do you have to put a fence around that water feature? It's a great question. In this particular case, we didn't. Just because of the setback from the street and the proximity to the house, the City of Highland Park did not require it. Honestly, I think we got pretty fortunate with that. Typically, if you're doing any kind of in-ground water feature, pool especially, you need to have at least a 4-foot tall fence enclosing the space, whether it's the entire backyard or immediately around the pool. Typically, from a design perspective, I recommend, the perimeter, so you don't have a pool with a fence directly around it. Helps keep the backyard feeling open but still protected. And with the fence, like I said, it has to be minimum 4 feet, 50% opening, and then self-closing gates, so that if anybody walks out, leaves a gate open, no one could accidentally wander in and have an accident. So that's a great question about the water feature.
I got a quick question here, Nate, that just got sent to me here. It looks like someone asked about like what the process would be for if someone calls in to try to get inquiry about design and or maintenance or landscape management program, what our typical process would be. So Nate and I could both speak to that probably, but as we have kind of a layered team approach at Chalet, that initial call would usually come to, depending upon what the requests would be, come into one of us, either Nate or I or one of our other designers or CRMs on staff. And then we usually try to meet on site if at all possible. This year, we've scheduled a lot of Zoom meetings or over the phone initial contact meetings first, but ideally we do like to get out. We can do that by ourselves or with the future, client, and just see what those needs are, assess the needs, and then either put together a design program, or if the needs are more, weekly maintenance or periodic maintenance management focused, we would tailor a program or a package together based on the needs. And then come back and present that, or send you that via email and kind of talk through the programs.
Right, that's a great point. Similar to that, another question about, is there any limit or to size of project that Chalet will do, whether it's something too small or too big? The answer is no. I mean, we'll take on projects of all different sizes. And we're set up in a way that we have people specialized in whether it's just a small portion of your garden that you need help with, or potentially a full master plan, full property renovation. Depending on your needs, your budget, your overall scope, we have people in different areas that can help you with that. So another question was for the pool project with the koi, how do you protect from raccoons? It's a good question. Thankfully, they haven't had any problems with that. I think, again, probably proximity to the house, also the lighting that they have in the front there. They do have some security lighting, motion lighting. I know that's not always going to be a deterrent for them, but they haven't had any issue with raccoons. They also, to my knowledge, have not had any problem with cranes, like sandhill cranes. I know that's been a issue with other clients in the past too, where you'll have new fish in the pond, and you look out and there's a crane standing there just eating them right out of the pond. So I've been fortunate with that. And Adam, you may be able to speak more to kind of the pond maintenance prevention, but whether it's raccoons or birds of other kinds that may have issues, trying to eat your fish. I know there's different types of netting or protection we can do, or perimeter fencing as well, to try and help with that.
Yeah, that's certainly a topic that we would talk about like within our annual program. So a lot of the water features, whether they're large or small, not only do we winterize them or start them up in spring, but certainly address things like that. So we have to get creative many times with situations like that. But those are all things that we would talk about throughout the season. You had me thinking, Nate, about like lighting. I'm working on a project right now where we did the initial design installation, and then as the plants on the site that we installed have grown and the canopies have gotten bigger, we need to adjust the lighting. So as I mentioned earlier, there's constant evolution of any project. And as that plant material grows, we've got to think about long-term growth from the start, but it's not uncommon sometimes to have to adjust. Maintenance, that's part of maintenance, is talking about adjusting the lighting, adjusting the irrigation, and tweaking things as they evolve, because there are no landscapes that are static by any means. They will need ongoing maintenance.
Correct. And a question here about from Annie about the Carex oak sedge. Which variety is it? It's Pennsylvanica. So it's the Carex Pennsylvanica. One of the more common ones. It does, like I said, it grows. Mostly, it does the best in semi-shade. I mean, it's really a woodland plant. We did encounter some problems with that early on. If you can still see this photo, these berms out front and the front yard. This is a south-facing home, so with a lot of glass as well in the front here. So we had a lot of heat buildup and reflection off the glass. That first summer, when the sedges were new and the roots weren't fully established yet, we did have some burning. No matter how much we irrigated, they were drying up and they were looking pretty stressed. So, but as time went by and they got more established, in the following season, they handled that heat stress a lot better and didn't show nearly as much browning. The sedges in the backyard typically have no issue. They've got a little bit more protection. They've got more sun. So yeah, the heat effect and the full sun effect was a little bit of a surprise that first year, but we've got that leveled out now. Let's see. Another question about river birch. What's the general lifespan, and do they do well in our area? They do, if you have them sited properly. I would say an average lifespan would be 25 years or so. And maybe Adam, you have a different take on that, having maintained them, but yeah, I mean, every plant has, a certain lifespan, a certain time, but I would say in that 25, 30-year range. And they do well. They do well in our area. If you've got them properly sited, where they're going to get some sun, they're going to be relatively well watered, whether you have an irrigation system or you're doing individual watering. They will handle some drought. They'll typically defoliate. They'll stress out and drop their leaves. Usually in a drought, that's one of the first plants you see stressing out are birch trees, but they do recover from that. So they do well in our area.
Yeah, we do like that tree a lot. I know in my own on-site evaluation that they're less susceptible to like birch borer, lot of people think of birch borer, beetles, and insects potentially with birch, but the river birch, Betula nigra, is it's not as susceptible as other birch trees. So that is one of my favorite trees, not only the native palette, but it's a great tree, river birch. Just keeping it maintained, like Nate said, with consistent moisture.
Right. Yeah. Consistency is key for a lot of plants. That's irrigation systems are great. That could be a blessing and a curse if they're not, managed and regulated as well. You could be overwatering in some parts of the season and underwatering in others. Question about the concrete platforms. Does the heating element prevent accumulating snow and ice even in below freezing temperatures? It does. So in the wintertime, so the heating element will actually keep that surface, whether it's concrete or bluestone or whatever your surface is, it'll keep it slightly above freezing. Slightly above freezing. So it's running at 35 degrees or so. And even when it's kind of resting, if it's not actively snowing, it's still going to keep it around kind of 30, somewhere in that range. So it doesn't have to fluctuate too much. So it doesn't drop down, shut off completely, so that it's, the surface of that material is at or below freezing temperature. It kind of hovers right around that 30-degree range. And then when snow actually happens, it'll heat it up just enough to get it past that temperature. So that's one thing about whether it's a driveway heating system or a specialty heating system, especially a gas-fed one, is that the initial investment is one thing, but the long-term investment in terms of maintenance cost and your overall fuel cost could be significant. Because if you have a giant driveway, for example, and your entire driveway is kept right around that 30-degree level the entire winter, whether it's snowing or not, it's still using a lot of gas. So that's something that a lot of people don't consider when they're asking for heating driveways or heated elements, is the actual fuel consumption. All right, I think we've gotten through pretty much everything. Adam, do you have anything else you wanted to add? We're kind of running up on an hour here.
I was just going to ask you, Nate, actually, when we look at this aerial view of your project with what looks to be the container boxes or planter boxes, I'm just curious, is that mostly seasonal change out? I know we have our signature container program where we change out a lot of these seasonal rotations. Are those good candidates for seasonal change outs, or is more of that, I assume those are all in planter boxes?
Through here?
Yeah, is that annual plant material?
It is, yeah. So those containers, especially the ones placed through here, those are 24-inch by 30-inch roughly. Those are all annual plantings, annual grasses and flowers. Same thing along this outer edge. There really isn't enough depth to those, enough soil volume to have anything that's going to be overwintered in that.
Right.
So, yeah, those are all annual rotations. I have other projects, and I'm sure you have too, where you have potentially bigger containers. Some of the resin ones, the lightweight ones, you can have maybe a 3-foot by 3-foot planter. You can actually fit a small tree in, or an ornamental of some kind, and have had success with that. But the more soil volume you can have, the better off for trying to overwinter something.
Right. We're at a couple job sites today doing seasonal change outs. So within our signature flower rotations, getting into the just seasonal rotations of color and texture. And we have a few recipes where we do that, and we can provide that, where, you constantly have that successional bloom, like you mentioned, Nate, or successional color rather, and texture. So that has been pretty popular. I just hadn't seen an aerial view of this project.
Yeah, I mean, having those containers make a big difference, whether it's, more of a permanent fixture, like I said, with these along the outside, or if you have other containers you can actually move around and stage in different areas. And just the flexibility of that physically moving things around, but also just the ability to change out season to season. It can be fun, really. You can have a lot of different opportunities to kind of explore with or experiment and try different things.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you joining us today, the time, and hopefully you're able to eat your lunch and take a little break with us. And like I said, if you have any questions, you can contact the hello@chaleznursery.com email address. You can reach us on chalet.com, chaletlandscape.com. And as well, this will be available on our YouTube page here probably within the next day as well. So appreciate your time and have a great day. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.